I'm going to be making a very unpopular video compared to a lot of the people out there and give an unpopular opinion about this. Not necessarily a debate versus mirrorless versus DSLRs, but mainly on why Canon and Nikon shouldn't be forced to make a mirrorless camera. A lot of you that have been following my channel for a while knew that I've basically been a Nikon shooter for most of my career. Recently, within the past year and a half-ish now, I transitioned into Canon because I wanted to concentrate more into video stuff, love the dual pixel autofocus, etc. But some of you also may know that I was invested at Sony at one point. I really did like what they provided in the a6000, the a6300. Then they just kept coming out with a bunch of cameras and I got super annoyed. So then I wound up selling all that down, downsizing a lot of my gear. And I've within the past year and a half as well, I also invested into Fuji. So I am into the mirrorless market as well. So I'm into both. Why am I into both is kind of weird. No, it's not common, but a lot of people are hybrid and for certain reasons. And really only because I love the Fuji stuff for street photography. I love the size of it, the size of the lenses, and it essentially has all the features that I'm looking for. And it just comes down to what the user wants and the features that they want. And a lot of the push for the mirrorless stuff is for the size, weight, features, and 4K video. Now, once again, I'm not breaking down DSLRs versus mirrorless, debating on which one to get. I just really wanted to talk about the Canon and Nikon thing and just give you some kind of facts on how the past couple of years have went. So I'm going to just kind of lay out a little bit of history, jump to, this time code, wherever I put it, if you want more or less just the opinion on the Canon and Nikon thing, but this really sets it up well, I think. I'm starting in 2016. I don't want to go too far back because 2014 is when Sony became a little relevant for their camera market. They weren't really 100% known. But in 2016, smartphones essentially were hurting camera sales. And you really saw that apparent coming in 2017, which I'll cover. The DSLR market for one of the first times showed a decrease in interest in sales, but there was more of an interest in mirrorless cameras coming then. Once again, you had a lot coming from Sony, especially in the full frame line of things, and that's not what the market was expecting, and that really shocked the market, and you saw a lot of people switching over. In 2010, there were 8 times more DSLRs than mirrorless cameras. Now, that being said, you're like, they had mirrorless cameras in 2010, 2011. They actually did. If you go back and look at the Sony NEX-C3 and 5N, the Olympus Pen E PM1, and the Samsung NX200, that was the mirrorless camera there, but they weren't widely popular. Once again, everyone was using DSLRs then. So to kind of set you up there to kind of how things were back in 2016, the numbers of cameras made and everything dropped for both, but they became more even. And that's why Sony, Olympus, Fuji, all that stuff became more relevant, especially Sony in this matter, is because there were essentially over 12 million DSLRs made in 2016 and 11 million mirrorless cameras made as well. So you were seeing the gap close ever so slightly, and that's why a lot of people were like, man, mirrorless is definitely the thing. Why is it so, intriguing? And to me, it's an easy why. It's because there was a push for more advanced features, and then you had, especially in 2017, Canon admittedly saying they're crippling their cameras, that they want to just put their stuff in the higher end, more expensive cameras. And that's how you kind of saw this distinction between both. But people wanted that 4K video. They wanted image stabilization, lighter weight, etc. That's why the push was so significant. But it also came down to, well, why DSLRs? Why are they still selling so well? And people are people just content with what they have? Are they not upgrading? Why are entry-level cameras still selling well? Especially the Canon Rebel line. It's because they're very easy to use. They're very easy to understand. And you could, and they're pushed more by stores. So jumping to 2017, smartphones essentially destroyed the point-and-shoot industry, the camera market, but camera sales were showing strength again. They were up 4%. DSLRs, though, they did increase their interest in sales about 8 to 10%. The numbers vary a little bit, but the mirrorless market was up about 30% as well. So once again, you're seeing that more push to the mirrorless line because of what features were going into these cameras. But the one big thing that really hurt, especially Nikon, was back in 2016 was the earthquake that hit one of their main facilities that pretty much put them out of commission for a release for about 6 months as well. So you saw that massive hit, and so did the market. And then in April of 2017, a report came out that Canon was the #1 in the full frame market, and Sony, for the first time ever, mirrorless took over Nikon at #2. So that, once again, came to a shock to a lot of people. and really just showed what Sony and the mirrorless market's doing. And Nikon is essentially right now in July, they will be coming out or announcing, they've been teasing their mirrorless camera. And in 2018, we don't really have any information yet, as the reporting really hasn't started or anything. But we do know that by 2019, Canon should have announced their mirrorless camera, and then Nikon in this year, in July, basically soon, should be announcing or at least showing more of a teaser of their mirrorless camera before photo keynote. So where does that leave us? Do they really need to make mirrorless cameras? And I don't think they do. I think they're just being forced and pressured into when they don't have to. Once again, it's not a debate against mirrorless versus DSLR. It's just a thing where it's almost a lose-lose in extent for either or. Nikon, you know, a lot of the push for the mirrorless, especially for video features, and a lot of people who buy this stuff just want better video, 4K video, good and low light, all that kind of stuff. Nikon's already a disadvantage because their focusing system has been trash, especially for video, compared to Sony, you know, Olympus, Panasonic, but especially Canon with their dual pixel, you know, capabilities. Canon's tops in that regards. But once again, Canon has also said that they've been crippling some of their features in their cameras to sell that high-end stuff. So they really have to hit a home run out of the park, or this will be an absolute failure for both of them, and just really show why they invest a lot of resources into this. So they really need to hit a lot. If it's anything short of like an A7 III, and it needs to be even more than that because the rumored prices are relatively double the price of an A7 III, especially on the Nikon side of things, it will be seen as a failure. And the other big thing that really is hurting them is that it obviously has to have a new mount, both of them, and you'll need the adapters. But then it goes to the argument is, does the adapter game hurt? Now, a lot of people even saw that when they went from the Sony A mount to the E mount. They had to use those lenses before a bunch of those lenses were made. And that's another thing that factors into this. They're now forced to concentrate on this new mount, making new lenses, even though there's the adapter. All in all, there really is a market for both. I am very happy with the Canon DSLR stuff, while I'm also happy with my Fuji stuff. I don't think there needs to be this huge competition. There really doesn't. You will 100% like the ergonomics of one camera brand over another, the menu systems, how it works, whatever works for you, whatever you're looking for, will make that distinction for you. Going back when I first started years ago into this stuff, I enjoyed what Nikon had over Canon. That's why I went with like the Nikon D3000 as my first camera. That being said, Sony wasn't around then, but I did really like when the Sony A6000 first came out, the size and what it offered as well, but ultimately, I just didn't really like it for actually shooting gigs. So that's why I went with something bigger. I went with more of the Nikon side, and then obviously eventually went to Canon. I do think it is a lose-lose situation. If it's very unappealing for what it is, which basically has been coming out of Canon and Nikon, nothing super exciting, it'll essentially just be a waste of time. But what are your thoughts down below? Once again, not the whole mirrorless versus DSLR debate, but can this be a win for Canon and Nikon? What are you expecting? I will be reacting to the Nikon mirrorless market as soon as mirrorless camera as soon as it comes out, because that's going to be pretty game-changing for them going into 2018. And then that also leads to, will that decrease their sales of DSLRs? And I don't know a lot of people who'd 100% love the switch using the new mount with older lenses to then having to buy the new mount. So I think if whatever this Nikon camera is, if it's very good, it better come with the adapter for free. Let me know all your thoughts down below. Hopefully, if you sat through the history, it kind of made sense to you why I put that in there. And if anything, you know, would you ever switch from a Sony? And if anything, and I think this is more interesting for the Sony users out there, I don't think there would ever be a need to switch over, but what would you like to see in the Canon and Nikon thing that might make you think, like, man, that's very interesting. What would get you to switch to that? Or would you pretty much just say Sony at that point and just say, all right, well, now there's competition. But I do think there is a need for Sony to be, you know, competed against in the full-frame mirrorless market, because they pretty much own it. And I just wanted to jump back in. I know I just kind of ended the video. Just a couple thoughts came up on why it's more of a lose-lose. It's that, you know, Canon's waiting till 2019. I think they're taking a great approach to it because they're going to try and see how Nikon goes and maybe their initial 2018 push and to see officially what they have to say. Now, is that like a cowardly move? I don't know, because if Nikon hits a home run with this one, the people who are looking to go more into mirrorless will be more invested into Nikon and might not wait for what Canon has to do. Now, that being said, I think Canon's waiting to see what Nikon's doing. Nikon might be rushing this a bit too much. But to further this, you know, loss thing is that a lot of the things will come down to the price. If it's too expensive, it will obviously be seen as a failure. But if it's nothing short of blowing away what Sony has out there, it's a failure for both of them as well. And I think Nikon is trying to put all their eggs into this basket to get it out sooner, to make the announcement sooner, to make it official, that it might hurt them by doing that. And that's why I think Canon is waiting a little bit to see how the market reacts and to invest their money wisely. But once again, there goes into a lot of factors, and Nikon and Canon, regardless of what they come out with, are already seen as the underdogs in this and are already getting, you know, a lot of crap talked onto them, because then if they release something that's a little, maybe even above lackluster or something that's okay, it'll be seen as, well, it's already been done before. You're not really added anything to this. And that's the big issue is, can either of them going mirrorless really add anything to the market or not? That is the big question, and that's the big, you know, risk and reward for either company.